Hello, everybody, and it is a cold, rainy night here in Japan where I am, and I have a hot bowl of soup, so everything is actually looking up in terms of things here this evening, I guess. But we are here to do a bit of a preview of Sadali, who is the brand new character released just in the last 24 hours. And before we start this review, I'm just going to say something that I actually tried recording this video once, but the app crashed. And it actually, for the first time in a while, actually, I just couldn't recover the data, which was interesting. That's a somewhat new issue that I very rarely have, but long story short, I lost the friend unit, and it's going to be another 24 hours before I get to see it again. Thankfully, I pretty much have my decision made up about Sadali, so let's take a look at him, and later in the week, once I can get some more footage of him, I will be coming back with a full review. So, first of all, Sadali, obviously a very important main character in the story of Wotv, so his coming to the game should not be overlooked even a little bit. And as for his kit, it is definitely a little bit scary to go up against. However, I do have some concerns that we are going to address. So first of all, Sadali. Sadali is essentially he is a permanent unit. You will not have to worry about him coming and going as other units sometimes do. Like Titus, for example, he will just be permanently added to the gacha pool, so even if you don't pull him right away, you can potentially pull him quite a bit down the line, and it won't be that big of a deal. He'll also have hard quests and all of that. As for the unit himself, he is a wind elemental character and a 100 cost character. He is a DPS, a support, and a healer. In terms of what I've seen so far of his AI priority, it seems to be focused heavily on support until the enemy is in range, then very much focused on DPS, and so far from what I've seen, he doesn't seem to give any kind of crap about healing whatsoever. So yes, early impressions, it has only been 24 hours, and I'm not pulling this character, but still review him anyway. So first of all, Devout, his secondary job, provides him some healing access and some extra support skills. As for his messenger class, essentially allows him some extra DPS movement buffs, and that's about it. So if you want a sub job that can potentially, add some more DPS and 100% hit accuracy, then you want messenger. If you want healing and support, then you should go for Devout. And the big thing from his main job on a very small 3 ahead of him, left or right or back of him, attack, he does have a 48% wind debuff, but honestly, I think that's just going to be primarily focused for, just for like DPS challenges, maybe some PvE content. It depends on what the enemies look like, and that's a really big thing about this character. In terms of like how good he is versus PvE, I don't think he's a farmer. I don't think he's definitely not a Black Witch Helena or Halloween Leela. This is not a mandatory character before we get too far into this. I think that this character is good. I think that he is a solution to a very specific problem that exists on JP that does not exist on global yet. And that's about it. I honestly think that he's just kind of a luxury character and just really for PvP. And to an extent, I actually think he's really just for manual PvP, because honestly, it feels like there's a few ways that this AI could just totally screw you over. And you're just kind of sitting there going, well, I guess I didn't think about that potential that could happen. But yeah, 3 jobs, it just depends if you want to win debuff, support, or just kind of more DPS and anti-evasion. Now, with that being said, we could talk about his main kit, but since that's the main part of him, let's talk a little bit about some additional value you can get potentially with his Trust Mastery. His Trust Mastery is overall kind of just okay, I think. I'm not rating this super high. I mean, it is a UR 100 cost TMR, so naturally it is at least a little good. My big problem with it, though, is that its ability, which is a decrease of healing power by 50 for 3 turns when performing a critical hit. Yes, it can be cast on other characters, it can be equipped, but this TMR could potentially be equipped by a lot of characters, but healing boost is not really that much of a problem in most matches. So this is nice, it's nice to have, but I don't think it's critical, essential, it's not bells, it's not a lot of other great TMRs, so this feels just kind of fine. It's fine. It's fine, you guys. It's all fine. But taking a look at the, we'll transition over to his main part of his kit, and then we'll go into, last but not least, support skills, counter, and resistances. Okay, so main job, he has basic attack that he can use 7 times, his ability cancellation. He can buff party members with attack and magic boosts, but only wind units apparently get AoE resistance, which is disappointing because it essentially focuses him a little bit more towards a wind team, and I think this character would actually be better on other teams that are not wind elemental teams, potentially, just because wind doesn't have that great of vision cards to really push his DPS high enough that I think he's going to be incredibly threatening. He's not going to be Astoria levels of DPS, but it is still good here just to be able to buff an ally. Next up, the most interesting ability in his kit is this one that can increase elemental resistance by 20% for himself and allies, but also gives himself and allies 2 additional effects. First of all, spell auto restore for enemies. So basically, if the units that get buffed with this, like so Sadali and let's say Mont, and Sadali buffs Mont, all of Mont's abilities and Sadali's abilities now, any attacks they use will automatically cancel auto restore, and secondly, will also cancel any secondary attacks on the unit. So for instance, Noctis and Astoria. If Astoria is using his Limit Burst, or Noctis is using his secondary Harbinger, I probably messed that up. It's been a while since 15. If either one of those second hit effects are active, they are immediately cancelled, and are cancelled for 3 turns. Very quick notes about this. First of all, these buffs are only available for 3 turns. So yes, he can cast this ability 3 times, but depending on how big the map is, and depending on what the timing is for him to get over there and start attacking units, these may not be active anymore, and that is a bit of a concern. Honestly, I don't even value the auto dispel, because first of all, the map would be need to be fairly small, because it's not even the timing that, for instance, this character casts it and he needs to get over there, or other characters need to get over their unit, but the other unit has to really have not gotten too much bonus already out of those. But really, it goes even further than that. Like, those are problems. If, for instance, it takes them 3 turns to get across the map, bells and, for instance, like any AP like generation over multiple turns effects have probably already finished or mostly finished. But it goes even worse than that, because honestly, some elements just don't care. They don't need any AP generation. A lot of the best units can just automatically gain enough AP because of certain vision cards. So I don't think that the AP generation effect on this is really any kind of incredible. I actually think it's just not even that important in auto or in manual. It just doesn't matter. As for the dispel, the second cast effects, this is really just to deal with Astoria. Noctis was never going to be an issue against the wind element, so for a wind elemental character to get it against an earth, yay, good. I guess you can beat up that unit even more than you already could. But really here, it's just about Astoria. Astoria is everywhere on the JP side. High-level guild battles, you see entire clans, guilds, whatever, with just all Astorias up and down them. So this is just a character to basically for whales to go after, to solve a problem that only really whales mostly have. And if this brings a little more variety in high-level guild battles, fantastic. Don't really care after that is mentioned. But that's the only reason that this character has this ability and that it exists, and it's not a problem for 98% of the characters in the game. It just doesn't matter. It's only for Astoria. And yes, Astoria being very strong is a thing that needs to be brought in balance, but Astoria is capable of dealing a lot of damage from all of his other abilities without even have to worrying about the second hit effect. Second hit effect is really overkill. So it's, again, just a luxury. Last thing the ability does is give spirit penetration, which between his new weapon, the Crystal Mace, and his Limit Burst, and like all the sources of magic resistance and penetration and spirit penetration, is capable of dealing a lot of damage, provided that there isn't a barrier. One of the biggest weaknesses for this character as a DPS is that he has no barrier removal, and he doesn't have any multi-hit abilities, so he's really, really screwed when he ends up against a barrier unit, because barrier units just will not give any amount of care to the fact that this guy is dealing DPS. He is not scary in that sense, so you will need to run this character, I think, with a barrier breaker in both PvE content as well as just regular content, or PvP content, if there are barrier characters, and future barrier characters too. Keep in mind, Aunt is getting a buff this month. We'll see what that looks like later, but just worth noting. Large AoE next up that decreases CT and agility. It's only for one turn, so it's not the scariest thing, but it is a pain to deal with. As for his piercing single target damage attack, interestingly, it causes confusion, and if the target is confused, they will lose 80 AP. That's a pretty big problem for the unit that gets confused. However, if that confusion can't land, if that confusion just misses, then it's just DPS. And again, we've talked about that with the potential problems that it could have against a tank or against just a barrier class unit. Last ability, job level 25, auto revive with increased chance of being targeted for the auto revived unit. Potentially really interesting just because it's a hate generation for another unit that already doesn't really care too much if it gets damaged. I don't think it's really it's not that next gen. There is auto revive cancel, so it's nice, but it's a single use, and I think that it could potentially backfire in certain cases. But it could be a really interesting idea to throw that ability onto an evasion unit and see if you can potentially scam a win that way. Now, last but not least is his Limit Burst, which if we take a look here, Limit Burst wise, this character, the big thing here, I mean, yes, it increases his magic resistance penetration by 50 for himself for the attack, but a 67% chance to charm. So with High Faith, this unit against units with no charm resistance can potentially easily be charmed. They get attack and magicka up, which means they'll hurt their allies more, and that's potentially interesting. However, that being said, this is heavily dependent on a single status effect, and if that single status effect loses any stock in the future, this Limit Burst loses a massive amount of stock as well. That charm is just so important, and depending on what enemies he's fighting, it'll either be advantageous or not. Really, Sadali is a mix of potentially good DPS with also a fair amount of support and some interesting one-offs that a lot of other characters don't have, a little bit of AoE, and some nasty status effects. There is enough here to recommend this character. He is a 100 cost, and I think he is generally good. But the real selling point of why anybody needs to rush down this character is if they're in high-tier guilds and they really want to exploit people who are slow on the uptake as well. This will just bring Astoria more in line in high guild. And I think other than wind fanatics, this really isn't any kind of character that you need to rush down and get really quickly. Taking a look at what his stats can look like, this one being kind of a friend unit, but or kind of a unit in a battle map that you can fight, but these stats are so close. I think the friend unit that I was able to access to on a wind party had about 6.5k HP, about that much magic, about 5 defense, 24 spirit, and about 300 and 350 for dexterity and luck respectively. Good amount of stats overall, but definitely not survivable against high-level ice team. And speaking of that, resistances, obviously ice is a major problem for him, but not just ice. He really doesn't have a terrible amount of resistance if you are building him for DPS. He only has about 20% slash resistance, 15% what was it? I think shooting resistance, and about 15 or 10% magic resistance. Let me double check that real quickly. 10% slash, sorry, 10% shooting and 15% magic. A little bit of bonuses from the equipment that the friend unit had on it. Those are that I just listed were his natural resistances. He has no resistance against spears and negative resistance against fists. And that's a problem because there are good spear units. I postulated the idea because he has no charm resistance, how funny it would be if Victoria actually limit bursted him and then he got charmed and then ended up attacking his own units. That would actually be pretty funny. Whether or not that would work, don't know, but it might make a fun video at some point in the future. Overall, Sadali is a fully capable 100 cost unit that I think is generally in line with the power level that we are currently experiencing on JP. Is a potential to really bring a problem character more into balance in the game. But honestly, I think that it really depends on how long status effects are completely ignorable, because as soon as they can be remotely ignored, I think this character will value stock, and it kind of depends on how good his AI is with dealing with multiple situations and jobs, seeing that he seems to have such a flexible kit to build him in multiple different ways. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Sadali. I'll have a more final review later once I have tried him out and fought him a few more times and asked around for a few other people's opinions as well. Shoutouts to Bismarck for being like really active tonight on getting Sadali's data entered properly. That's made a really big difference in the recording of this video. And to end this video, because some people were complaining about the political messages in the last one, really was like a political message, and even if, no, I don't consider it political, just humanitarian. Glory to Ukraine, fuck Putin and his oligarch brothers. And if you support Putin, get the hell out of my channel. Just get the fuck out of here. I don't want your views. I don't want your support. I don't want anything from you. Seriously. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care. See you next time. And take care of yourselves.